What's up, guys? Welcome back to the seventh ever episode of Keeping It Spooky podcast. I'm your host Luke here with my co-host Ink. The first in-person pod. We've got the group together.
Very nice.
We're ready to pod. This is our first official, pod of the 2024 season. So let's just go over our first two rounds. We're gonna do the first 24 picks. Go over our rankings. We've both combined into making a list. And if you want to get started, Ink, on the first 101.
Yeah, I'd love to. First and foremost, I'd like to thank God for this wonderful opportunity to be here in person for the seventh episode of the Keepin' It Spooky podcast. I'd also like to apologize to our many viewers that we haven't recorded in 2 months. We did record an episode for after the draft, but it just kind of got screwed up a little bit. So
the glazing was hard.
Oh yeah, there were a lot of agendas being pushed, and it's better for the public that episode is not released. So without further ado, let's get into this. So we have combined for our own consensus top 24. There's a bit of just different opinions amongst the two of us, but this was the best that we could do combining. And the first pick is pretty obvious.
Well,
I think
it can be. I mean, it is consensusly CMC at 1 because he's just so good last year, but you can also consider CeeDee Lamb just because of how efficient he was last year as well. So when you look between the both of them, it's the elite or the elite. But CMC is just a bit more elite. In my opinion, there's been more stability there in that offense. Second official season under Brock Purdy, I guess third kind of. But, the contract situation with CD and Dax, some things are up in the air in Dallas. I like stability more when I'm picking one, and I think CMC fits along those lines more.
Yeah, I'm along with it. I mean, Christian McCaffrey's been the best player in fantasy for a while now. And there's really not a reason to think otherwise. CeeDee Lamb was fantastic last year. We've kind of talked about this before, but Christian McCaffrey is we really haven't seen a fantasy player like him in a long time when he's healthy. Last one I can think of, LT, yeah. I mean, no one else has really been on that level since LaDainian Tomlinson. So taking Christian McCaffrey at 1 in what is supposed to be a juggernaut offense that runs through him, I think that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, he scores a touchdown basically every week. There's more odds of him not scoring a touchdown than him scoring a touchdown. Just how just ridiculous he is. That needs to be put in a sentence alone. 2, CeeDee Lamb. I love CeeDee Lamb. I got to be honest. He's an elite player, elite wide receiver, an amazing season last year. The best, kind of finally that breakout. I mean, he was always good, but just that official kind of breakthrough. Because he was drafted in the second round last year. This is his first year in round 1, which is kind of crazy to think about. So, CD, I think, is the best wide receiver for fantasy this year. Tyreek Hill, we're going to talk about him, but there's a bit of uncertainty, but he's still amazing. CeeDee Lamb, he's going to get everything thrown towards him. Dallas has an unsure running back field. And Brandon Cooks is aging. CeeDee Lamb is the main weapon on this offense, and I see everything, and I mean literally everything running through CeeDee Lamb.
Yeah, he was the wide receiver 1 last year for fantasy and for the Cowboys, obviously. But the offense looks pretty much the same, just no Tony Pollard anymore. And CeeDee Lamb was treated as a number 1 wide receiver last year, and nobody could guard him. So I don't see that changing this year as long as he's a Cowboy. Dak is a serviceable quarterback that'll get him the ball. And for all the reasons that we could argue CeeDee Lamb is wide receiver as the overall number 1, that's why he's number 2. If it weren't for Christian McCaffrey, I think it's a pretty set in stone 1.
Yeah, if Christian McCaffrey wasn't here, he'd be, number 1. But yeah, I mean, there's some uncertainties with Dak's contract, but I don't think that's going to affect CeeDee Lamb's fantasy value too much. I think it's just overall Cowboys kind of play. Mm-hmm. Now our third overall, Tyreek Hill, he's our wide receiver 2. Tyreek Hill had some weird lingering injuries last year that do need to be said, but I don't think it's going to affect him too much. He's still the focal point of the Dolphins offense, despite Devon Achan, Jalen Waddle, Tua Tagovailoa is kind of mid, but whatever. And yeah, Tyreek Hill had elite production at the start of last year, kind of dipped off towards the end, but I don't see anything really changing. He's still Tyreek Hill. He's still one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Scoring touchdowns out of nowhere. You just find himself open all the time. I don't really think there's much of a debate here. He's my wide receiver too.
Yeah, and there's also like I remember a few years ago Tyreek Hill saying that he was going to stay the rest of his contract and then he was going to retire. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. He's like looking for a new contract and everything. We'll see how that shapes out. But he's just such an electric player. We haven't seen anybody like him ever. Like just that ridiculous combination of speed and athleticism is unmatched. Nobody's as fast as Tyreek Hill. The plays that he makes are like ridiculous. Remember 2 years ago when he had that he recovered a fumble and went 60 yards for a touchdown.
Chargers,
it's just ridiculous stuff. And Tyreek Hill is good to give you those explosions as long as he's healthy. Just a ridiculously high ceiling, and that's why he goes third for us.
Yeah, and like I said, maybe a bit of an injury concern just because he's older now, but that's gonna happen. I think he's turning 31 this year. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, he's gonna look it up. But anyway, our fourth overall player, Justin Jefferson, our wide receiver 3.
He just turned 30.
Okay. He's okay. Anyway, Justin Jefferson is our wide receiver 3. Bit of a quarterback concern. JJ McCarthy, Sam Darnold, Nick Mullins. We don't really know who's starting. It's seeming like Sam Darnold's going to start week 1, which I don't know how it's going to affect Justin Jefferson, but I think Justin Jefferson by himself is just quarterback proof. I mean, we saw how well he did with Nick Mullins last year. The game against Detroit was just a joke. One of the most efficient, best wide receivers in the league. I don't really see a debate. I don't think he should be falling out of the top 5. That's for sure. I think people are overreacting to this quarterback situation because Justin Jefferson, the elite of the elite wide receivers, make plays out of nowhere, and that's what Justin Jefferson does. And he can literally catch anything that goes in his sight. So I don't see a reason why he'd fall anywhere further than 5.
Yeah, you don't need to give me an excuse to glaze Justin Jefferson. I'll just do it anyway. Like he's really freaking good, to say it as simple as possible. Like Luke said, the quarterback situation, I don't think it matters either. He did well with whoever he was playing with last year. Jordan Addison being on the other side of him is very helpful to him, even though he still gets the attention that he gets. Jordan Addison does help with a little bit with spacing. But Justin Jefferson he's just like he's matchup proof, he's quarterback proof. You can't go wrong with him, in my opinion. He was the de facto number 1 last year, and that was with Christian McCaffrey being an option.
Yeah.
So I think that Justin Jefferson needs to be given his flowers, and I think being wide receiver 3 makes a lot of sense. You could argue for him being above Tyreek Hill even.
Yeah, definitely.
But just because of those slight quarterback concerns, I think 3 makes sense.
Yeah, perfectly said. Now number 5, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is progressing. He's getting better every single year he comes into the league. Last year he was elite. And the thing I love about Amon-Ra St. Brown is the amount of receptions he gets and the amount of touchdowns he gets. Very efficient. The thing with Amon-Ra, he just became, I think, the second or first highest paid wide receiver in the league, which is crazy, but well-deserved. A lot of things in this Lions offense run through Amon-Ra St. Brown, as well as Jahmyr Gibbs, who we'll talk about, as well as Sam Laporta, I guess. But
no, he didn't need to be mentioned.
But Amon-Ra St. Brown, I just don't think you can go wrong with him necessarily. I love the spot, and I think once you're drafting, if you want to get one of the elite wide receivers, Amon-Ra St. Brown has to be in that bunch just because of how well he did last year. And I don't see a point in where he's going to decline. I don't see any reason to think he's going to decline at all. So I love the Amon-Ra St. Brown pick this year.
My favorite thing about Amon-Ra St. Brown is the combination of how high his ceiling is, along with the ridiculously high floor. He's as consistent as the receiver position gets.
Yeah.
It's rare that you see a game where he's like under 14 points. He's always showing out. He always gets a bunch of receptions. For PPR purposes, he's a lock in the top four. Um, he, like you said, he continues to get better. He is the focal point of the Detroit Lions offense. As good as Jahmyr Gibbs is, he's the focal point. He brings the energy. He's the tone setter. He just does everything that you would want from a PPR wide receiver. The catches are great. He gets a decent amount of yards per reception. He scores the touchdowns. He even gets involved in the run game sometimes. He's just a great player, pretty electric, and like I said, it's super consistent. So if you're looking for a super high floor and then also having that high ceiling, the ceiling I would say is close, but it's not quite at the level of like a Tyreek Hill or a Justin Jefferson or a CD. But Amon-Ra is similar to CD Lamb in the department of gets a lot of catches, super consistent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's going to stay in that wide receiver 4. He can honestly be a wide receiver 2 this year if he moves up all the way. I can see him having a better year than Tyreek Hill and Justin Jefferson. I don't think that's too hot of a take. CD Lamb, I think, will, take off, do whatever, and be the consensus one. But I can see Amon-Ra pushing up that far. Anyway, our 6th overall, our running back 2, Breece Hall. Now, Breece Hall, coming off an ACL injury last year, started off slow as expected last year, and he progressed really well towards the end of the season, really making a lot of receptions for PPR, which is very important. The game against the Commanders, 2 touchdowns, what was it, 45 points?
Yeah. His game against the Browns later on in the season was really good as well.
Week 16, 17. If you had him in the fantasy playoffs, he probably won you a game or two. Really consistent. This Jets offense has only gotten better. They've improved their O-line. They've gotten their tackles. They drafted Olu Fashanu. They've gotten depth in the O-line, which they haven't had in, their existence,
like a long
their existence. So, God forbid anything happens, Breece Hall has a good O line. Aaron Rodgers hopefully should be healthy. Giving Breece Hall carries inside the goal line, getting a lot of goal line work as well. Obviously, Braylon Allen was drafted, and I think they drafted another guy. I forget his name, but I wouldn't worry about them. Maybe a handcuff later on, but that's what we're talking about today. In terms of pure ability and fantasy output, Breece Hall, I think, is running back 2 or 3 right now. We have him 2, and I love the Breece Hall pick this year.
I love Breece as well. You mentioned Braylon Allen. He's looked good in camp, but really shouldn't be a worry. Breece is one of the best running backs in the NFL when he's healthy. His rookie year, he was electric until he got hurt. And then after he finished his recovery last year, he was fantastic as well. Good in the receiving game, one of the best yards per clip. Like he's pound for pound, he's one of the best running backs in the NFL, and you can't really take that away from him. Great for fantasy. He's a no-brainer for me. If he's available, I'll probably take him.
Yeah.
He's really good, and I'm excited for him this year.
Also, a thing to mention as well with the Jets, they're going to have a passing game this year, or at least they should, which they haven't had. Last year, they didn't have a passing offense at all. This offense legit ran through Breece Hall getting just beat up. He must have had 20, 25 carries a game, getting absolutely shredded. But this year, he should have a passing offense, which is going to open things up for him. And I'm really high on Breece Hall this year. Anyway, our running back 3, Bijan Robinson or Bijan Robinson. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Anyway, the Falcons have a new regime. Who's their head? Raheem Morris is their head coach now, with Zach Robinson as their offensive coordinator, who is 2 great offensive, and I guess Raheem Morris is a great defensive mind as well. So, and they also signed Kirk Cousins, which is talked about one of the heavy focal points of this offseason, how well Atlanta's going to be doing. Drake London, who we may or may not mention, probably not mention today. But yeah, Bijan Robinson, we saw how good he could have been last year, but he was held back by Arthur Smith. Just hard to watch, honestly, because you saw the talent and they just didn't use him. They were using Tyler Algier, and Tyler Algier will still get his, random third down carries or whatnot. But Bijan Robinson, this offense will run through Bijan Robinson. There's no doubt in my mind. The talent he has is extraordinary. It's just unreal. And I love Bijan Robinson as a RB3, and in the later mid first round, I think it makes perfect sense to draft him.
Yeah, Tyler Algier is really good, but Bijan is levels above. He's the best running back prospect that we've seen since Saquon Barkley, and he got drafted as such. And they pretty much had him on a snap count last year. Cordarrelle Patterson was getting carries. That won't be a concern anymore.
No.
Tyler Algier will still get his, but I imagine that there will be an increase in production for Bijan this year. And that's not to say that he wasn't good last year, because he was. He was pretty freaking good last year, but he's going to take that next step. At least that's what we project. Passing game will be better because there's better offense. The offensive weapons are there. Kirk is there to actually air it out instead of Desmond Ridder holding onto the ball for like 20 seconds and fumbling.
Yeah. Kind of the same concept with Breece Hall, is that the offense is going to open up, and the offense is still going to be mainly run through these two guys because they're young, and these guys can pound the ball, and goal line work is going to be very well for both of them. Anything else to comment on?
Let's talk about Bijan. I mean, there's not really much else to say. He's super talented.
Yeah, I mean,
and he's just in a better situation. Him and Breece, same exact formula.
And Bijan Robinson could honestly, I mean, I don't know how you're going to feel about this. I mean, CMC is there, and obviously he's going to be the one, but Bijan Robinson could be the two. I mean, he could push McCaffrey as well. He could be in those range, because we haven't really seen Bijan Robinson at his productivity at his best. And I think this could be the year. And it makes a lot of sense for Bijan to have that sort of breakout.
Yeah.
Anyway, Jamar Chase is our wide receiver 5. He's ranked 8th for us. Jamar Chase has weirdly been getting a lot of, I guess, disliking around our friends. We don't really understand why.
In our league.
Yeah, but we're not. Anyway, Jamar Chase, in my opinion, is very due for a big year. Last year, injuries, Joe Burrow got an injury as well. Just the Bengals, it wasn't their season last year. Let's just face it. This season, they should be back, better than ever. Or not better than ever, but their offense should be back. And Jamar Chase, we saw how reliable he is with Joe Burrow. I mean, the 50-point game against the Cardinals was just unreal. And the him and Joe Burrow connection just seems to be getting better and better. They're both learning off each other. I don't really see an issue with Jamar Chase. Obviously with Jamar Chase, the thing is you kind of have those low games and you have those spiking high games, which is the reason he ends up so high. But that's not really a huge concern for me. I think he's going to find more consistency with Joe Burrow being healthy, and hopefully Jamar being healthy as well, because that's also been an issue during his career.
Yeah, as long as Jamar Chase, you can't project injuries. You can be cautious about them and not take it at full value, but you can't predict them. And that's kind of what you have to do with Jamar Chase here. He's due for a big year, like Luke said. Since his rookie year, we've kind of been a little bit upset with his production. He's still been great at times. He's had 2 of the best fantasy performances of the past 5 years, both over 50 points. The ceiling is super high with Jamar Chase. And if he can stay healthy for a full season, there's no telling what he can do. He could really change some narratives about him and the Bengals this year with his performance. And I'm on the train. I'm on the Jamar Chase train. I'm ready for it. I'm ready to see what he can do in this offense. I'm ready to see what his ceiling is.
And the thing is, we also have him relatively low compared to some other, rankings out there. People have him as high as like 4 or 3. He can go up there. Realistically, he can go up there.
He's also trying to earn a contract this year. I mean, like, he's already done a lot to earn a contract, but it's a contract year. This is going to be his 4th year. Time to prove what you're really made of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And T. Higgins, they did get the contract thing settled at least this year. But I'm not as worried about T. Higgins as I am. I think Jamar Chase won't be affected by that
Mhm.
as in previous years. And I think Jamar Chase will be the focal point, like we said with the past 8 guys.
Yeah.
Anyway, number 9, and this might be different than what you've seen, but this is our opinion. Number 9, Jonathan Taylor is our running back 4. Jonathan Taylor in 2021 was the best running back in the league. CMC and Derrick Henry both kind of had their, I think, injuries that year.
Yeah.
But we really saw how good Jonathan Taylor was that year, and then last year he was on the PUP list. He was battling injuries. Um, the contract situation with the Colts was a really bad situation, but they've got that figured out. They've got their quarterback who isn't hopefully
He'll hopefully stay healthy.
yeah, and should be secure. And people are worried about Anthony Richardson taking rushing touchdowns from Jonathan Taylor, which I understand. But I think this is a dynamic that can work very well between each other. I think they could both bounce off each other, and I think Taylor will still get the goal line work because they're not going to want to risk throwing Anthony Richardson into what he did last year, hurting his shoulder. I think they're going to be a bit more conservative about him. Anthony Richardson will still get his rushes, etc. But Jonathan Taylor will get tons of carries and just get tons of yards for the Colts.
Yeah. And I've kind of touched on this before. I don't know if it was on this podcast or not. A big Anthony Richardson is essentially heading into year 2 as still a rookie. And he was a raw prospect when he came into the league. I assume that the Colts are going to be a little bit more cautious. They're going to try and encourage the checkdowns, RPOs, things like that. Exactly. Encourage those checkdowns to Jonathan Taylor. So I'm very happy with what I project in the receiving game for Jonathan Taylor this year. And he's also just a great running back. You've seen him since his college days at this point. The best running back in college football. He should have been the first running back selected in his draft. And he's been really good ever since. So Jonathan Taylor, I don't have any concerns going into this year. I think he could be due for his second best year.
Yeah,
because I don't think he's going to be an RB. I don't think he's going to be RB1, but I think he's going to be super productive.
The thing is, John Taylor is I think he can get a ton. I think he can maybe lead the league in rushing yards. I know that might be a hot take, but I think this is a good bounce back year for Jonathan Taylor. Everything is sorted out now. That was issues before, and there's more stability there, which is always something you want to look for in the first round when you're taking players. Anyway, number 10, our second Jets player, Garrett Wilson, which is a concern because we shouldn't be getting too hyped on the Jets. But anyway, Garrett Wilson is, we said Jamar Chase is due. Garrett Wilson is extremely due because he actually has a competent quarterback throwing to him for the first time in his career, I guess, since CJ Stroud in college. And now he is Aaron Rodgers, who, in previous, Aaron Rodgers had a connection with Devontae Adams, Jordy Nelson, just to name a few. I mean, I don't think Aaron Rodgers will be back to his best necessarily, but I think that Garrett Wilson is the guy that Aaron Rodgers will be looking for all the time down the field. Garrett Wilson, I think, will have so many receptions because, the Jets, they have Mike Williams, who's a big, long play guy, but Garrett Wilson will be doing everything for this Jets offense in terms of the passing game.
Yeah, I think the bottom line is for Garrett Wilson, it doesn't matter if Aaron Rodgers isn't Aaron Rodgers that we're used to and accustomed to. It is still better than any quarterback that he has had so far in his career. And he's nonetheless been very, very productive. He's been a 1,000-yard receiver. He's caught a few touchdowns.
A lot of touchdowns, surprisingly.
Really?
Yeah, a good amount.
I thought he had 6 last year.
I mean, that's pretty good considering.
Yeah.
That he was the only guy who's getting receiving touchdowns for the Jets.
You're right. Yeah, but Garrett Wilson is ridiculously talented. He won Rookie of the Year with freaking Zach Wilson and Mike White as his quarterback. He's so good, and even if Aaron Rodgers isn't Aaron Rodgers, like I said, Garrett Wilson will produce. He's essentially quarterback proof, but the ceiling is he is. Because the
Well,
thing is, he'll still be super productive. But I'm saying with Aaron Rodgers at quarterback, with a talented quarterback, he's a wide receiver one,
yeah.
which he wasn't
The
before.
thing that say also is like he's not going to get worse than he is last year
Mm-hmm.
because he can't do worse than last year considering how bad his quarterback plays, and he still put up great numbers. I'm actually checking his numbers from last year, but yeah, the thing with Garrett Wilson is he's going to produce more than he has in previous years. So yeah, last year he had, let me check, 95 receptions. 95 receptions for 1,042 yards, 3 touchdowns. Sorry, but I think those are only like
Yeah,
there's like
that was like all their offense
yeah,
aside from Brees Hall. Like,
which is pretty good. 95 receptions is pretty good. And if he gets those yards up, he could easily finish. We have him as a wide receiver 6. He can usually finish as a 4, But I like more stability with my first round, as I said, and I think Garrett Wilson finally has some of that stability
yeah,
because he can't get worse.
yeah. God forbid. God. Hopefully, there's no injuries. But if there's no injuries, whew,
Yeah, exactly.
like watch out. Garrett Wilson is here.
And now number 11, probably the most explosive player in the NFL these days, and it was only his rookie year last year. Jahmyr Gibbs, what a player! Our running back 5. He would be higher, but he does still have Dave Montgomery in that backfield. The thing also to mention with the Lions, I didn't mention it with Amon-Ra St. Brown because I'm not as worried about it with Amon-Ra, but there is a lot of like mouths to feed in this Lions offense. But Jahmyr Gibbs, if you're looking for an explosive play, you're going to get it out of Jahmyr Gibbs. He'll create something out of nothing. A really great runner, good on the receptions, and Jared Goff will be looking for him a lot this year. I don't know how many rushing touchdowns he's going to get, but the receiving work should make him worth the first round pick no matter what.
Yeah, Jahmyr Gibbs. He's one of my favorite players going into this year. Um, I imagine that it would be not as drastic, obviously, but a similar situation to Bijan, where there was a bit of a snap count on Jahmyr Gibbs last year, in my opinion. David Montgomery got a healthy dosage of carries. It was a pretty much even split.
Mm.
I imagine that going a little bit more into Jahmyr's favor
Yeah,
this
it's
year.
like a 60-40.
Yeah, but like it'll be a little bit more Jahmyr this year, especially in the first half of the season. Jahmyr was not getting close to the touches that Monty was, and it got more even as the season went on. Gibbs is just really freaking good at like everything. Get him in space, and he's one of the best players in the NFL at just making things happen in space. He's super fast.
Yeah,
Ran a 4.26 at the combine 2 years ago, I think. Like he's really explosive, really fast. He's their receiving back. Like the ceiling is very high with
yeah.
Jahmyr Gibbs.
But also the thing is to mention that when obviously we've kind of implied it, but if you're drafting Jahmyr Gibbs, Dave Montgomery's still going to get his work because in the Dan Campbell system, he likes the ground and pound of kind of the Dave Montgomery and then the quick explosiveness of Jahmyr Gibbs. So Monty's still going to have his role, maybe a little less than last year as we kind of discussed, but I'd just be cautious of that. I'm not saying don't draft Gibbs. I'm just saying be cautious of it. I honestly, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I wouldn't hate if you had both of them because they're both going to produce. Montgomery is like an RB3 and Gibbs is your 1. It's not the worst scenario in the world because they're both, the Lions offense is one of the most explosive in the league and they're both going to get their work.
Having both of them is honestly like that's probably what you should aim for.
Yeah.
Even reaching on Montgomery isn't a big deal if you have Jahmyr Gibbs. Simply because of the fact that both of them do get work. And then, God forbid, one of them gets injured.
Yeah, exactly.
You have your RB1.
If Dave Montgomery gets hurt or Jahmyr gets hurt and vice versa, no matter what, these guys are going to be creme de la creme.
Great options.
Yeah. So, yeah, perfectly said on Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, our last pick of the first round, Saquon Barkley as our RB6. Saquon Barkley's entering his first season with the Philadelphia Eagles, obviously left the Giants. Saquon Barkley could go berserk, and I think his floor is pretty high. Considering it's Saquon Barkley, he finally has an O-line that's competent. He finally has an offense that's flowing well.
A quarterback that's competent.
Yeah. Yeah, I just didn't want to diss Daniel Jones because I do it too much.
It's fine. Jim Carrey shouldn't be playing football.
Anyway, the thing that everyone's worried about Saquon is with the goal line and Jalen Hurts, the tush push. I don't think it's going to be happening as much this year. I just don't see it. Why do that so much when you have one of the best running backs in the league in Saquon Barkley? And Saquon Barkley is going to get a lot. I think should get a decent amount of receiving work as well. I don't think you can really go wrong with Saquon Barkley. We look at the guys behind him, the running backs behind him. He definitely ends this like first or second tier of running backs. There's definitely a drop off after him, and I think he's a lot more upside than an ETN, a Kyron, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm on the same page in terms of this tier of running backs. If you want a tier one running back, this is where it stops.
Yeah.
This is where it stops. You'll still have RB1s down the line, but they're not the same RB1s as these guys.
Yeah.
Saquon Barkley is a fantastic option just because of how talented he is, how freaking strong he is. Super strong. He's elusive, not quite as elusive as he used to be, but still a great running back.
And not to mention, he had a great year with the Giants when he was healthy last year. Like I think he was averaging running back 4 numbers as well in that offense. So to have that and now in a much better offense, much better scenario, I don't see how this can be a bad pick whatsoever. Obviously, we're not counting on injuries. We can't say that. And I think it makes a lot of sense for Saquon to be going here.
Yeah, I'm super happy with Saquon here. Like Luke mentioned briefly, the goal line work could be potentially a concern just because of how effective the tush push was last year. And Saquon also squats like 600 pounds, so it's a bit. We're gonna have to see how it plays out, but even with a bit of subtraction of goal line work potentially, Saquon Barkley has still been really good even without a lot of scoring opportunities with the Giants. So I don't really have a concern.
Yeah, and he's very efficient. You know, when you look at running backs, you want to see efficiency. Hence why Austin Eckler dropped off. He became less and less efficient as time went on. Saquon Barkley, although he doesn't have that quite like, I guess intense explosiveness as he did before, he still has the efficiency, and he's still one of the most efficient in the league. So I don't see that being a bad pick whatsoever. I don't see that flopping. Yeah. Now, our second Eagle, AJ Brown. Now, AJ Brown, I do have concerns about. I can't lie, because there is a lot of mouths to feed in this Philadelphia offense, and I think he could kind of, be affected by that a little bit. But it's still AJ Brown. AJ Brown's still going to have his explosive games. We saw how good he was at the start of last season. Kind of dipped off towards the end, but all of the Eagles did. So I don't feel like that's a super valid argument. AJ Brown will, have his 30 bombs, and then he might have his like 10 bombs, but that's just how it goes with like, a super high powered offense. But he's still going to get his work. Him and Jalen Hurts have formed a connection. I don't think he's on the same tier as like a Garrett. I mean, maybe in the same tier as Garrett Wilson, but he's definitely not in the same tier as your Jamars, your Amon-Ra's, your Justin Jeffersons, etc. There's definitely a bit of a dip off, but it is still AJ Brown. He's still as good as you can get in the second round. And if you start off a draft, just say if you have AJ Brown and Jahmyr Gibbs, that's one of the best starts you can potentially have in a draft. And there's no issue with AJ Brown being a wide receiver 1.
Yeah. AJ Brown's a great player. He looked like the best receiver in the NFL when Justin Jefferson was hurt last year and Tyreek was battling with his injuries. He had that stretch of games where he was just going off, had a bunch of 125 receiving yard games in a row.
Yeah.
And he's just he's too talented to doubt, honestly, with Jalen Hurts being a competent quarterback. And Devontae Smith being another wide receiver 1 caliber of player on the other side of him. You can't really choose to double team one of them because then the other one will burn you. Along with all the other options like Goddard, Barkley, and even Devontae Parker to a much lesser extent, like being their third wide receiver. AJ Brown's ceiling is super high. The floor is low, but it's just taking the risk of picking a guy on a very high-powered offense with a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah, and the difference between like an AJ Brown and an Amon-Ra is that the Lions offense does flow through Amon-Ra. And,
Mhm.
if the Lions didn't have Amon-Ra, it'd be a lot different than the Eagles not having A.J. Brown, because the
Mhm.
Eagles can easily adjust without that.
Exactly.
Not easily, but it'd
No,
be a lot easier to do
yeah,
that.
yeah. That's what separates them is the how different the offense becomes. If you take CeeDee Lamb out of the Cowboys offense, that I don't even know what their passing game would look
No,
like. If you take Tyreek Hill out of the Dolphins, you saw how that affected the Dolphins last year. They were not as good. They were not close to
no,
being as explosive. Take Justin Jefferson out of the Vikings offense. Jordan
nothing.
Addison is very talented, but like
Yeah.
Vikings were bad last
And they
year.
don't have Hawkinson as well. And that's a side point.
Yeah.
But
Amon-Ra's the engine that runs Detroit. Jamar Chase, we've seen him injured, and the Bengals don't look the same. And then Garrett Wilson, we haven't seen in that situation, but
I
I
think
bet.
that can become a scenario there.
Oh yeah, if the Jets don't have Garrett Wilson,
Mike Williams isn't putting up those numbers.
no. So yeah, that's what separates these guys, I think.
But don't get me wrong, AJ Brown's not a bad pick at all. He's still a great wide receiver one. I'm just saying that that's what separates the tier 2 and the tier
Mhm.
1 of these wide receivers.
Yeah.
Anyway, our second guy in this kind of tier 2, or I guess third, I don't know. Puka Nacua at 14. He's our wide receiver 8. Puka Nacua, we saw how explosive and electric he was in his rookie season. The numbers he put up was outstanding and kind of, surprised,
Mhm.
very surprising, because we didn't know who this guy was coming into the draft.
He didn't have a picture till week 3, I think, like on ESPN.
Yeah.
Because I saw him sitting in free agency when it said that Cooper Kupp wouldn't be playing. He didn't have a picture, and then he dropped 30, and then he had 15 receptions in week 3, I think.
Yeah, it was like 17 or something
It
ridiculous.
was it was so dumb. Like wow. Puka Nacua, best rookie year that we've seen out of a receiver. We've been super spoiled with these rookie years from receivers over the past few years.
Yeah.
I don't know if he'll have the same production as he did his rookie year. It's a lot. It's a really big
Ask.
It's a huge ask. But even if he puts up similar numbers, that's like top end wide receiver talent.
Yeah.
And picking him in the second round shouldn't be a concern at all.
And listen, like the thing is, if you look back on drafts in previous years, if you look at the second round, a lot of these guys don't perform to the way they do. And if Puka Nacua, if he's little under what he replicated last year, he's worth this, second round evaluation. He's still wide receiver 1 in your team. The concern I have with Puka is the Cooper Kupp, because Cooper Kupp was dealing with tons of injuries and stuff last year. And I think he should be fully ready to go this year. I don't think
we'll see.
Yeah,
you never know.
You do never know. But I just think that will affect his production a little bit. But I don't think it's going to make him, undraftable. He's still Puka Nacua. Matt Stafford formed that connection with him last year, and I don't see that stopping. I just see the receptions being a little less than before. Maybe the yardage, and then he didn't have too many touchdowns last year anyway.
No, not really. It took him a while to get a touchdown, I think.
Yeah. But I'm just saying that I think the production just might be a little less than last year, but that's still okay, because Puka Nacua finished as a top 5 wide receiver last year. So it's okay that he's not going to be the top, But in this range, it's completely worth taking Puka Nacua.
I imagine him scoring more this year. The receptions and receiving yards might not be as high, but the scoring could make up for that. He's a big-bodied receiver. There's no reason that he shouldn't be getting red zone touches.
Yeah.
And as long as Stafford's healthy, which is it could be a concern as well.
It could be.
I'm not concerned about Puka Nacua. And if you are still worried about Puka Nacua and his longevity as a player, like just being good for more than 1 year, watch him play. It's not a fluke. It's not like this is just a guy randomly getting big numbers. It's not a system thing. Puka Nacua is the real deal. Just go ahead, pull up some highlights on YouTube, pull up some film on YouTube. Like he does anything that you want from a receiver.
And also, I think it's important to say that McVay will make Puka Nacua, the player he is. He'll get the best out of him. And I wouldn't worry. If he was on a different team, I'd worry more about him. But, Puka Nacua on the Rams, I'd say it's a pretty safe bet. Anyway, number 15, our running back 7, Travis Etienne. Travis Etienne had a great year last year that no one really talks about, and I understand why, because there's, I guess sexier picks.
He was RB2 last year, wasn't he?
I think he was RB3 because Mostert jumped him.
Right, Mostert.
But I think there's sexier running backs, above him. If you look at Saquon, Jahmyr Gibbs, you're going to want to take them over Travis Etienne, which is perfectly understandable. But I think Etienne, Trevor Lawrence really, and the Jaguars kind of flown through Travis Etienne the first few weeks of the season, and it worked out well. He's not the most efficient guy that we've seen, but he gets receptions. He got a good amount of touchdowns from what I remember. Tank Bigsby was not even a concern at all. He was phased out after week 2. That weird rumor that he was going to take over, it didn't happen. So yeah, I think Travis Etienne is a safe pick. I don't think he's necessarily one of the top guys. And I see him having a pretty, I guess, safe floor, but I don't think he's gonna, take over any of those guys above him, to be completely honest. I don't see him taking over Jahmyr Gibbs or Saquon. I just don't see it. But I like the floor with Travis Etienne. He's been there for a few years now. And yeah, I think he'll be reliable in the Jaguars offense, but just maybe not the best.
Yeah. I kind of see Travis Etienne's situation similarly to the Eagles last year. Like we were talking about AJ Brown starting to sputter towards the end of the season. Whereas I feel like it was kind of similar with the Jaguars. Everyone on the Jaguars started doing worse towards the end of the season last year. They kind of just collapsed. I'm not really sure who to attribute that to, whether it's to Trevor Lawrence, who just got a freaking bag. What the hell was that about? I don't know what. He should not be getting top end money, especially after he played last year, or whether it's to attribute to Doug Peterson, who I think is a good coach. But it could be on him. It could be on a whole bunch of things. Calvin Ridley's expectations going into the year, he didn't live up to those. But the Jaguars sputtered at the end of the season, and I don't know if I'm gonna put that onto Travis Etienne way too hard, because he was still really good last year. He was the RB3, like Luke mentioned. There's concerns to be had because of the Jaguars offense. We're not sure if we can trust it, but I think your safest bet is Travis Etienne at this point when it comes to running backs.
Yeah, he's very safe. And like the thing with the Jaguars is there's a lot of question marks, but I think him and like a Christian Kirk, they know the Jaguars, they know they want to play. And I think these are reliable guys in the offense. Gabe Davis is not reliable. This isn't a Gabe Davis hate video. Anyway.
Any one of our videos is a Gabe Davis hate video, and you know it.
Okay. And at 16 here, we have Kyren Williams, our running back 8. Kyren Williams is a guy I'm concerned about. He is a guy, but I can't put him too low because of the production he had last year. An incredible season. McVay really got the best out of him. Absolutely torched the Cardinals. It was hard to watch, but Kyren Williams is a very talented player. But we've kind of seen in these McVay systems like Todd Gurley, they come in and they do really great and they're incredible. And then, McVay kind of brings a new guy in or he does something different. And they drafted Blake Corum in the 3rd round. And when I was talking about Travis Etienne, I was thinking Tank Bigsby. And now, we're talking about Blake Corum coming in. It's kind of like a similar thing. It could, Blake Corum could completely be phased out of the offense, but Blake Corum could also eat into this offense as well. He could get his carries as well. And I think that's something to note. And Kyren Williams is still I think he should get great production, but I don't think the offense is going to be, as strictly on him as it was last year. I don't think he's going to get, the amount of carries he was because McVay loves to, give his running backs tons of carries and just let him do work. And I think bringing Corum was smart because now they have 2 guys that can do that. And I don't think Kyron's going to get he'll get the better half of that, but his production will definitely take a little bit of a hit.
Yeah. Kyren Williams is a guy that we've seen get hurt multiple times already, unfortunately. He was out his entire rookie year with injury. He got hurt in the middle of last year, and I'm pretty sure he got hurt towards the end of last year as well.
He was on IR.
Yeah, and Ronnie Rivers was getting carries because they couldn't give this man the ball. But when he is healthy, he's super explosive. So, like Blake Corum is someone to worry about because of how Sean McVay is able to get the best out of players, and Blake Corum could just come onto the scene and ball out. But Kyren Williams, that's another guy. Like he's super small, but he's like dynamite. Like he's a very small running back. He's a shorter guy. He's like 5'8", 5'9". But he's really explosive. He runs hard. He runs angry like Pacheco does almost. But there's things to be worried about for sure, and that's why he's in this tier with ETN.
Yeah.
It's just super talented players that we saw do really well last year. But there's just a lot of concerns, a lot of question marks.
Yeah. And perfectly said. And now we'll move on to number 17, Marvin Harrison Jr., the rookie, our wide receiver 9 on the board, which may be a little high to some, but I think obviously like you said, we've been spoiled with rookie wide receiver production for the past few years now, and I'm hoping and I'm pretty confident that he can replicate some sort of that level. I don't think he's going to break the Puka Nacua records that he just gotten, but I think he's going to have great production. And I think this Cardinals offense will flow through Marvin Harrison Jr. Everyone in camp has been saying how he's over impressed everyone, how he's better than they actually thought he was. I don't see Marvin Harrison Jr., being like being up in that Amon Ra. Just I don't see that yet. But I think in this rookie year, getting used to things, Marvin Harrison will get work. He'll get production. Touchdowns might be a bit of a concern. He's not going to get a crazy amount of touchdowns, but he'll get work. And Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals, they need to get Marvin the ball because we've learned that Marvin Harrison is one of the best prospects we've had, and that we need to get him the ball. We need to make this pick worth it because he was 4th overall. It's a high selection for a wide receiver, and he's worth it. But
He's the best playmaker on the Cardinals straight out the gate.
Yeah.
No one should be getting close to the amount of touches that Marvin Harrison is. Kyler Murray's back. Kyler Murray, as much hate as he gets, is still a very talented quarterback and can get the ball into Marvin's hands.
Like he did with D-Hop.
Exactly like he did with D-Hop. Marvin Harrison is the best wide receiver prospect that we've seen in the past 5 years, and that's a group that includes Justin Jefferson, that includes Jamar Chase, includes Jalen Waddle, includes some other names like Devontae Smith.
Yeah,
like just guys like that. This guy's better. This guy's the best prospect that we've seen, and that's why the hype is there. This might seem high for a rookie wide receiver if you have not followed Marvin Harrison throughout his college career, which I don't know how you can miss it. He's all over ESPN. This is supposed to be the guy. This is supposed to be the Larry Fitz successor, and to a higher degree, because Larry Fitz was great. He probably wasn't as talented as Marvin Harrison Jr. is. He should be the real deal, but this is completely based on projection because we haven't seen him in the league yet.
Yeah.
But we have full confidence that he can be a wide receiver 1 this year.
And yeah, exactly. And rumors and OTAs, like I said, he's impressing the hell out of everyone. And also he was thrown into the most perfect scenario he can for a rookie wide receiver. He doesn't have a bad quarterback. He's on a young and up and coming team. He's a wide receiver 1 straight into the gate. And I think this is a good spot for Marvin Harrison Jr. I like him over guys that are below him. I think he's more upside, to be completely honest. Like the next guy we're going to talk about, Davante Adams. Davante Adams last year was great for some weeks, and then he was terrible other weeks. I don't think it's necessarily his fault that he was terrible, but it's just how things turned out. We saw weeks at the end where he had 40 bombs, and then he had I think he had a zero. I think he had a donut.
I think he did have a donut.
Yeah, I think he did with Jimmy Garoppolo and the Josh McDaniels system. But now, they have Antonio Pierce. They have apparently Aiden O'Connell is beating Gardner Minshew as things stand on July 2nd. That could change. We don't know. But hopefully. But we saw a lot. If Gardner Minshew does start, we saw how last year he worked well with Pittman. And I think that could be replicated with Davante Adams because Davante Adams is better than Pittman is. I mean, I like Pittman a lot, but Davante Adams is a bit better than Pittman is.
Davante Adams is a guy that we were talking about a few years ago as the best receiver in the NFL. I don't think that that's completely gone out the window.
No.
He just went from Aaron Rodgers to Derek Carr to Aiden O'Connell. So, yeah, of course the production's going to go down.
But he still beat, he's still getting 15 points a game, something like that,
Mhm.
and compared to his 19 or 20 before. But 15 points a game is very worth the ADP of the 208, or sorry, the 206 way we're formatting it.
He fits into this tier very well.
Yeah.
Like Marvin Harrison is the one that kind of like glares out of this tier because all the others are very similar, I think. Like the AJ Brown, Puka Nakua, and Devontae are all very similar. It's just because we can't put Marvin into that other
Yeah,
tier.
you can't put him into the elite tier when we've never seen him play.
Yeah.
You can't do that.
So he fits into this tier because super high ceiling, floor can be very low as well, right? It can have a very low floor as well. But at the same time, you know that overall the production will be there. Devontae Adams gets his numbers, whether it be a consistent over the season, getting like 15, 17, 23, like just like consistently, or he'll have his 40-point explosions, then he'll have his really crappy games. But he's going to get numbers regardless. He'll end up as a top 10 wide receiver, likely, for sure, top 15 if he doesn't get injured. Devontae Adams is a good pick here in the second round. This is where it's not surefire anymore, but you're just drafting for trying to get great players on your team.
Yeah, and I don't think, like you said, I don't think you really go wrong with it because he'll still get his probably around 100 receptions this year, and he'll still have those games where he could put up 11 receptions, 180 yards, a touchdown. So he can still do stuff like that. It's not like that player is not there anymore. So I don't think he has necessarily a low floor, as you said. I think he has a decent floor. I just don't think he has the same floor as the guys above him.
I meant on like a game-to-game basis.
But I just don't think he's going to be putting up the 20 points a game that these elite guys are averaging. He's going to put up a 15, 16 kind of points per game.
Yeah.
Now, another guy that we do like over here at Keeping It Spooky, Chris Olave, number 19 as our wide receiver 11. Chris Olave is basically the only receiver that's viable on the Saints.
Like Rashid Shaheed, but he's not a fantasy guy.
No, he's not. He's a deep threat that just
he's just fun to watch.
Yeah,
he's not like.
But we saw how reliable Chris Olave has been in his first 2 years in the NFL. Obviously, his production is a bit, I guess, underwhelming to what we've seen. I think his talent outperforms what his output has been.
He's a great player to watch as well.
Unbelievable. But his rookie year, we saw glimpses of what he can be. He was getting tons of receptions. Last year, the Saints are in a weird spot as an organization, but Chris Olave is what they're going to focus on this year because he's the bright spot of this franchise. He really is. I see him getting a ton of receptions. I don't necessarily see tons of touchdowns necessarily, but I see Chris Olave getting to that 100 receptions. I like the production that we can get out of Chris Olave. I see him in a similar tier to Devontae Adams. I don't think he's going to have those games where he gets 40 points, but I think he'll be consistent. And that's what you look for.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page. Chris Olave to me feels like Garrett Wilson has felt the past few years. They were teammates in college. They're both really freaking talented receivers. They both made like great plays, great highlights and everything. The production has been there despite bad quarterback play. The difference is Garrett Wilson now has Aaron Rodgers. Chris Olave still has Derek Carr.
Yeah.
And that was his best season so far last year with Derek Carr because Derek Carr was an upgrade over whoever they had. Who did they have before? Andy Dalton. Was that their quarterback the year before that? I think it was.
Was it Jameis?
It was Jameis and Andy Dalton. Those are the quarterbacks
Jameis is a fantasy.
No, but Jameis has also been hurt though.
Yeah.
So
it's inconsistency. There's no stability. He hasn't had stability at quarterback, and now I guess with Derek Carr he does. Hopefully Derek Carr can stay healthy because they were forming a connection towards the latter end of the year. I like Olave just not as much as I like a Marvin Harrison or a AJ Brown, and it makes sense because we haven't quite seen that, upper echelon of production yet. We've seen the talent, just the production needs to be there, but I think he'll be consistent this year, and that's what you look for.
If he gets a better quarterback than Derek Carr, no offense to Derek Carr, he's just like kind of an average quarterback at this point.
At this stage.
Average starting quarterback at this point
Yeah.
in his career. And if Olave were to have a better quarterback, then I think that he could be like one of the he could be at the same spot as Garrett Wilson, basically.
Yeah.
But
I think this is a fair spot for
this
him.
is a fair spot.
Okay. Number 20, Isaiah Pacheco. He's our running back 9.
Angry ass.
A lot of people, I've seen like mixed opinions on it, Isaiah Pacheco, because I've seen him go as high as like 15 on some people's boards, and then sometimes he's like in the 4th round, which is weird. It's a weird spot for Isaiah Pacheco. But this Kansas City offense will be flowing well. Isaiah Pacheco had actually a pretty solid year last year. He was consistent, obviously battled with an injury towards the end of the season, but he was consistent, and he gets touchdowns. He gets a lot of touchdowns. The offensive line is good. Patrick Mahomes, I mean, enough to be said, he's incredible. Isaiah Pacheco will get production in this offense. There's no really competitors. There's no Jerick McKinnon anymore, which is an important point to make because, he's not going to be getting that goal line reception work, really, unless some random guy comes in, which like Louise Reed.
Whatever.
But yeah, Isaiah Pacheco should be their guy on the ground, getting 20 carries a game, 15, 20 carries a game. It's being their guy on the ground, slowing down the pace. I like Isaiah Pacheco as kind of a balancing out with the Xavier Worthy, Marquise Brown. I think Isaiah Pacheco's due for a consistent, solid year.
Pacheco seems to me as like the next generation James Conner. Just a very consistent guy, but he's not less injury prone. He gets the goal line touches. The ceiling isn't the highest, but the floor is very high.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what Pacheco seems to me to be like. And this is a good spot for that because, like we said, the running back fall off is pretty steep.
Yeah,
it's pretty freaking steep. We went from Etienne and we went from that upper echelon of guys to Etienne and Kyron, and now we're at Pacheco.
And, Isaiah Pacheco is a great player. He's not the sexiest pick. Don't get me wrong. He's not the sexiest pick. But I think what you look for here is consistency. If you're, if you draft a wide receiver in the 1st round, you need a guy to kind of lead your running backs. I think Isaiah Pacheco can be that RB1 for you. I don't know if he'll necessarily finish as an RB1, but on your team, he'll perform for you and be consistent, and that's what you look for. 21, Michael Pittman Jr. Now, you're higher on Michael Pittman Jr. than me. If you want to explain that, go for it.
Well, Anthony Richardson is back this year. Hopefully for the entirety of the season. He's one of the most talented quarterbacks that we've seen from just a physical standpoint. Athleticism. The arm is ridiculous. The arm is like Mahomes and Josh Allen, like in terms of power and how far he can throw that thing.
Yeah.
And Pittman did great with Gardner Minshew at quarterback. I love Gardner Minshew, but I can even admit that he's not the best quarterback in the NFL. He makes he's a perennial backup. He's like this generation's Fitzmagic. That's what he's going to be. But Pittman did great. Pittman had his best year to date. He was going to go off against the Steelers that game if it weren't for that injury in like the 2nd quarter. He already had like 20 fantasy points. I'm just super high on Pittman because I think Josh Downs is coming into the picture. He's starting to emerge as like potentially a second option. He's better than Alec Pierce is. And then A.D. Mitchell was a guy I was super high on coming out of the draft as well. So the receiver trio is there. Hopefully those guys can start taking some defenders away from looking at Pittman. And Pittman is their wide receiver 1. He, aside from Taylor, they were without Taylor a lot of last year.
Yeah.
And Pittman really broke out as like one of those guys. Like he's a good wide receiver 1 to have in the NFL. And I think the numbers will replicate that or show that.
Yeah. I don't hate Pittman this year. I'm not as high as him as, I guess some other guys. The thing with Pittman for me that worries me is with Anthony Richardson. I don't know how many targets he's going to be getting a game. I don't know how many times he's going to be seeing the ball the game, which is a concern for me because, we look at his numbers last year. He barely reached the end zone. He barely scored touchdowns. He was great. He got so many receptions last year. I don't know if he's going to replicate the same amount of receptions as he did last year. And that's okay because the production he was putting up last year puts him higher than we have him now, actually. But I just don't see him replicating that with Anthony Richardson. I don't, because Gardner Minshew's kind of like he like relies on the wide receiver more than he kind of has to. I don't see Anthony Richardson doing that. I see this team more running it a lot, and I think Pittman will still get a lot of work. I just don't think it's going to be necessarily to the degree we think.
Okay, that's fine.
But I don't dislike Pittman. I just think there's other guys around him.
I'm still really high on him. I just think the offense will be better this year, so
Yeah.
he'll be in a better position.
It can open things up for him. It works both ways. Okay, number 22, James Cook as our running back 10. I like James Cook this year. They've gotten rid of Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, and we saw towards the end of the year this offense actually shifted more towards a running scheme. It used to be a lot of passing schemes. Now it's shifted towards running. James Cook got a lot of work, especially in that Dallas game towards the end of the year. A lot of reception work as well. I think people are just not as high on James Cook because he's kind of frail. He's not exactly the most sexiest player you've ever seen, but he does get a good amount of receiving work, and in a PPR format, I like him. I think he's a lot of upside. Him and Josh Allen have kind of formed this connection. And I think he has a decent floor compared to these guys. I don't think he's going to be, shifting up the draft board, going as high as, some of the other guys like an Etienne or Williams. But I kind of like the stability in James Cook. And he did well when they threw him into the system. And he proved that he is, working well and fits his system.
Yeah. It's weird because we've never seen James Cook in like a real featured role.
I mean, towards the end of the season.
Towards the end of the season, until the end of the season last year. Because in college, he was really like the receiving back. He was like the Donovan Edwards to Bam White's Blake Corum.
Yeah.
Like he was the receiving back in college. He ended up going in the second round off of like just the talent and measurables and everything.
Maybe a bit of name value.
A bit of name value. It was like nepotism low key. But James Cook looked great at the end of last season where he finally got a chance to be the featured back. Devin Singletary has been gone for a year now. Damian Harris unfortunately had an injury. Latavius Murray is old as hell.
Yeah.
And James Cook gets to be the featured back for all of this season. This is the first year that we're going to see that. So he's a little unproven, but from the small sample size that we saw at the end of last year, I mean, it looks pretty good. I'm just hoping that this isn't a Tony Pollard situation.
I can understand that comparison, but the thing that I think differentiates that is with James Cook, the Bills, like I said, lost Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis. I'm not, but mainly Stephon Diggs. It's not going to be an offense. All these guys are adjusting. Keon Coleman's adjusting to the system. Curtis Samuel is. It's a new kind of look for the Bills.
Khalil Shakir is the mainstay.
Yeah. So I think they're going to integrate James Cook kind of similar to how they did towards the end of the season. If he produces that the way he was at the end of the season, he perfectly fits this kind of range. Now, number 23, Ink was changed it up as I was speaking before, but I kind of like this opinion, and I know he does because he wrote it down. Alvin Kamara as our running back 11. Now, if you play PPR, this is PPR, by the way, not standard, because he might be in like the 70s.
Oh, yeah, no, Kamara, the freaking standard fantasy players hate Alvin Kamara. I don't think he's ever ran for 1,000 yards. Like
it's just not it. But in PPR, Alvin Kamara is a cheat code because he just gets like 6 receptions a game, and even if he puts up like 30 yards rushing, he'll give you like 18 points.
Yeah,
just because the amount of receptions he gets.
And he scores touchdowns too.
Yeah. So Alvin Kamara, although there's uncertainties around, I guess, his character and the suspension last year, Alvin Kamara is one of the most consistent guys you're going to get in PPR format just because of the way he plays and the way that this Saints offense looks for him. He's not going to get the most ground and pound work. He's not going to get that, but he'll get the receptions. And in PPR, that's what you need. That gets you points.
Alvin Kamara is a great example of how to extend your career as a running back in the NFL. Just being the kind of player that he is, it's a style of game that ages super well over time because he doesn't take all those inside zone hits. Like he's more of an outside threat, a guy to get in space, but he's also the starting running back. He gets the goal line touches and he gets his receptions out in all the free space. So like Alvin Kamara is a great guy, even though he's probably the oldest running back that we've said so far. He's the same age as CMC.
Yeah.
Like that's the style of play that will extend his career, and he's still a great option in 2024.
Which is crazy to say because he was drafted in 2017 and he's continued to produce every year in PPR.
7 years for a running back is wild.
Yeah. I do think it's important with Alvin Kamara. If you're going to draft him, I do think it's important to draft Kendre Miller later, but we'll make a separate podcast.
We love to talk about like random running backs as handcuffs. We love doing that. So
yeah, and I do think Kendre Miller is a worth an investment if you're drafting Kamara.
Mm-hmm.
Now, lastly but not least, our last player that we're going to talk about in this podcast, Josh Allen. He's our QB1. Some lists have him higher. Some lists have him around here. I think it's a perfect spot for Josh Allen. You know, we've seen how good he is in, fantasy. I mean, he rushes. He gets rushing touchdowns. I think he had 15 last year.
So yep. He had the same amount as Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts had the tush push.
Yeah. He's just a cheat code. Obviously, he did lose Diggs, which is a concern, but Diggs wasn't really a part of the offense towards the latter stage of the season, and he was still producing at a quarterback one level, and he still won people multiple amount of games.
Yeah.
I don't see an issue with Josh Allen. He's a consensus QB1. And you can't really go wrong with him. Obviously, there's guys that, are going to have, I guess, more of an upside. But in terms of pure points scored, Josh Allen is one of the best players you can get in fantasy.
Losing a player like Diggs obviously hurts. But if you look at the latter stretch of last season, it was a lot of Dalton Kincaid and Khalil Shakir and the James Cook run game. And then the Josh Allen run game.
Yeah.
So, I'm not concerned about Josh Allen going into next year. Losing Gabe Davis doesn't hurt. We're going to just continue to freaking thrash Gabe Davis throughout this entire podcast. But I don't know where it's coming from, but it's happening.
It's deserved.
But, yeah, no concern. Khalil Shakir stepped into a pretty good role last year. He's not going to be expected to be the wide receiver one of this team. I think eventually Keon Coleman will step into that role. Curtis Samuel's a good veteran to have. Great veteran to have. He's a good playmaker. And what Josh Allen does with his legs, you can't really match with many other quarterbacks in the league. Just because he's like Cam Newton.
And talk about a guy that makes a play out of nothing. This guy refuses to go down. He will just make a play out of nothing. And owning Josh Allen, it's truly an advantage at the quarterback position over any of these other guys. I mean, Jalen Hurts and Mahomes come close, but I mean, Josh Allen is in this QB1 tier by himself, and then it goes to the tier behind him. But I think Josh Allen is worth at the back end of a second round or start of a third round investment. It's completely worth it because you know what you're going to get with him.
Yeah.
And I think that just about wraps it up. We've talked about 24 players. Hopefully this gives you guys some insight, just an extra opinion.
No, just to go over that list one more time. We'll go.
Okay.
1 CMC, 2 CeeDee Lamb, 3 Tyreek Hill, 4 Justin Jefferson, 5 Amon-Ra St. Brown, 6 Breece Hall, 7 Bijan Robinson, 8 Jamar Chase, 9 Jonathan Taylor, 10 Garrett Wilson, 11 Jahmyr Gibbs, 12 Saquon Barkley, 13 AJ Brown, 14 Puka Nacua, 15 Travis Etienne, 16 Kyron Williams, 17 Marvin Harrison, 18 Devontae Adams, 19 Chris Olave, 20 Isaiah Pacheco, 21 Michael Pittman Jr., 22 James Cook, 23 Alvin Kamara, and 24 Josh Allen.
Yeah, and that's about wraps it up. And we're going to be more consistent now that there's actually NFL content to talk about.
Woo!
Preseason's coming up, a lot of points to talk about, and this is the real prime time to do our podcast. So we're excited. We're going to be back, hopefully doing, I don't want to say weekly, but as much as we can. And yeah, thank you guys for listening. It was really fun being back. And yeah, we'll see you for the next episode hopefully soon.